What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. In this video, we are going to get into the worst thing, or things I should say, about Poland, specifically what I have noticed in Warsaw. Now, before we do that, make sure to smash the like button. Costs you nothing, means the world to me, really helps me out with the algorithm, and I would truly appreciate if you could do that for me. Now, with that said, let's get into the topic at hand. So, there is one disclaimer that I want to make. I am not Polish. I do not speak for the Polish people, and these are simply observations. Well, not observations. These are simply things that I have been told by the local Polish people here, and the things that I share in this video aren't my personal point of view or my perspective. And once again, I'm not saying this is going to be the perspective of all Polish people, but multiple Polish people have said this exact same thing to me. And so this is what I want to share with you. First, I'm going to start off with a little bit lighter note. And the number one thing that has personally annoyed me is the absolute horrendous customer service. Okay, so you practically can't get anything fast here. Like, if you ask for a glass of water with ice, there's another thing. They don't really serve water cold. It's always like room temperature, and if you ask for ice, it could take 30 minutes to get a thing of ice, like a bucket of ice or a cup of ice or something like that, which absolutely insane. And then if you're ready to pay for the bill or what may have you, getting the attention of these people leaves a little to be desired. Now, that is kind of standard fare in a lot of places in Europe, but it seems especially annoying, or particularly annoying, should I say, here in Warsaw, Poland. Because sometimes I go to places to eat, obviously, and I kind of want to get in and out. I'm not trying to be there for 2 hours and then, wait 30 minutes for some ice cubes so I can drink cold water. And I know that it seems like kind of a small thing, but it's just a little bit of annoyance, especially because I don't cook. So I rely on going to restaurants for all of my meals. And so when something that should take, I don't know, 30 minutes takes an hour and a half, a little bit frustrating. And once again, obviously first world problem, so that is not the biggest thing ever, but it is something that has personally annoyed me a little bit. Obviously enough for me to point it out in this video, although it probably should not have been too surprising. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is maybe leaning towards a little more controversial. And part one of this is going to be the fact that Poland is a bit cliquey. I don't know how exactly to explain it, but if you're trying to build a social circle, it's going to take a lot of time. They're not exactly the most receptive to letting others into their social circle. You really need to provide value. You really need to gain their trust, and you also need to kind of show that you are providing something of value. And this is why it gets a little bit tricky. I've noticed that a lot of this is due to the influx of Ukrainians that have come here. Now, this is where I have to reiterate what I said in the beginning of this video. These are not my views. These are probably not the views of all Polish people, obviously, but these have been repeated to me. These statements have been repeated to me enough for me to take notice that it's not a small thing. So, what I want to say is that it seems like the Polish people do not like Russians or Ukrainians pretty much at all. So, part of what I have heard, once again, from the local Polish people, is that they feel like Ukrainians are taking advantage of the situation since the whole thing a couple of years ago started between Ukraine and that other country. Okay? And what I mean by this is when that first happened, they were very welcoming, very open to accepting Ukrainians into their country. And a lot of those Ukrainians seem to have not been providing value in return for what they were receiving. And so they were just coming here and kind of mooching off the Polish people. Once again, not my view. I'm not Polish, so I don't have like boots on the ground knowledge of how this situation has unfolded over the past couple years or however long it's been. But they definitely feel that they have overstayed their welcome to some extent. And then some of the Polish women have other views on Ukrainian women, but we won't really get into that topic for the purpose of this video. And then obviously it goes without saying that most Polish people don't like Russia because world history. You guys can look into that for yourself if you want. I kind of touched on it on one of my videos when I was talking about the Palace of Art and Culture, something like that. So it's definitely a place with an interesting history, but kind of tying that back together, it's a little bit more difficult to build that social circle, and it's cliquey because most Ukrainians are going to be hanging out with Ukrainians. Most Polish people are going to be hanging out with Polish people. Here's another thing I should mention. If a Ukrainian was here before the issue started a couple years ago, they're viewed a little bit differently because they were probably providing some value. They had a job, they were, putting money into the economy and so on and so forth. So they weren't just leeching off of what the Polish people were providing for them. And so it's a little bit different than, just Ukrainian versus Russian, because it seems like just Russians in general are not viewed highly, period. So, yeah, I found that a bit interesting. And I think that's why it's probably getting a little bit harder to get into the social circles and why it seems a lot more cliquey. Because it seems like Polish people don't really want more outsiders coming into their country. And that also kind of goes back to something else that I was saying about how this is obviously related only towards Black people mainly, but how Black people from, Western countries in general viewed a little bit differently than the typical immigrant that is, fleeing whatever situation they have occurring. And what I mean by that is like the Ukrainians that were here prior to what happened and established themselves and provided value, they're widely accepted, appreciated, and people really enjoy them. But if they came post that event, it seems like they are viewed differently. Here is another thing I wanted to add to that video about the feelings towards Russians and Ukrainians in Poland. So I've also noticed a large number of people have complained about the housing market in Warsaw, specifically closer towards the city and even towards the outskirts. And that's because a lot of these Ukrainians came here and they completely distorted the rental marketplace. So, like, there's a university. I think there's a couple universities here. And apparently, all the university kids got priced out of the housing market because of all these Ukrainians who came here. And I think I mentioned this earlier in this video, or some point in this video. I stopped recording and then I remembered I wanted to add this, so I'm adding this at a later time. Surprise. So, I think I mentioned that a lot of the parents of the people who live here, especially in the younger age bracket, are financially helping support their children so that they can live in Warsaw. And a lot of that is because the rental prices have been distorted over the last couple years. So these people may have been able to live in Warsaw a couple years ago, build a life here, get jobs here, so on and so forth. But as the rental market got completely distorted, they couldn't afford the same things. And I'm not saying it's like a large sum of money that they are being helped with, but it is definitely something, especially from what I have noticed. And there is also a bit of a, what can we say? Sugar baby culture that has started to show its roots here. Once again, I do not partake in this, but that has to do with the distorted price of some of these things over the last couple of years. Women have had to resort to doing these things so that they can pay their rent or what may have you, so that they can live closer to their school or to live, relatively close to their school, because everything is getting a little bit distorted. And so that has also added to the anger and maybe resentment towards the Ukrainians, because they are being pushed out of their own country, city, whatever, not country, but pushed out of the city. And a lot of them don't feel like it is very fair that this has happened to them. And you certainly can't blame them. But obviously, I'm probably not one to talk too in depth on this situation, because my lifestyle, obviously, as a digital nomad, there are certain countries that have issues with digital nomads because they did the same thing. I mean, I have a place in Portugal, and the people in Portugal feels a certain type of way, especially in Lisbon or Lisboa, however you want to call it. They feel the same attitude because they could afford it, and then slowly, as more digital nomads came, as Portugal was trying to attract more digital nomads and more people to be interested in residency there and giving tax breaks and things like that, they got wealthy people to come there. And then the wealthy people obviously started paying more for the housing, which distorted the housing marketplace. And so you're starting to see that trend in multiple places. And like I said, I can't blame them. But it is another thing that I wanted to touch on. Someone was telling me that when the situation occurred, the Ukrainians came to Poland, and some of the Polish people opened their homes to these Ukrainians. Specifically, I'm not going to get too into detail because it's not super important who the person is, but her family opened up their house to a Ukrainian mom and their daughter, I believe it was, while the husband was working on getting out of Ukraine. And they lived with them for, I want to say, at least 4 months, and pretty much didn't help at all. Nothing financially, they didn't do anything, they weren't cleaning up, they weren't really providing value in exchange for, these people feeding them and giving them a place to live um, while this situation was occurring. So they were, doing something really nice. And at one point, the wife of the person that was letting them stay in this house told the husband, "How long is this girl gonna stay here? She's not getting a job. She's not doing anything. Like, you've had plenty of time to find a job, so on and so forth." And it became kind of apparent that they had a sneaky amount of money. Okay. And so he talked to her about it, like, "So what's your like long-term plan," kind of thing. And she was like, "Oh, we won't be here much longer, blah blah blah." But then her husband finally got out of Ukraine and pulls up in like a nice luxury vehicle. I don't remember the specific brand, but it was nice. You have to have money to be able to afford one of these cars, kind of nice. probably wasn't like a Lamborghini Urus or anything like that, but maybe it was a Rolls Royce. I don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't want to uh, give the wrong details, but suffice to say, they had money, and they ended up, like, within the couple days of the husband showing up, taking off to Los Angeles and moving there. And from what I have been told, it seems like this has been kind of a common issue. Ukrainians that have come here tend to have a little bit more money, possibly, but they don't really provide anything into the economy. And in fact, a lot of them seem to be leeching off of the economy and taking advantage of the situation. And once again, I want to reiterate, I'm not Polish. I'm not speaking for the Polish people. I am just sharing with you what I've heard from numerous different people that don't have any relation to each other. They don't know each other. But so I thought it was worth noting. And so, I mean, I guess that was a long way of saying that no matter who you really are, it could be a little bit more difficult to ingrain yourself within this culture in the present day. And I'm not saying people are going to be aggressive or rude or confrontational or anything like that. But I will say that apparently some of the smaller cities are a little bit or massively different. That is probably something I should talk about in a video, is that Warsaw is a way different vibe than most other places in Poland, especially like the smaller towns. But yeah, so that's kind of an unrelated tangent, I should say. So if you're expecting to come here, they might be a little bit more cold. You shouldn't have any like real problems. But if you're looking to be here longer term, you're probably going to want to learn some level of Polish. I found that a lot of the Polish women are way more receptive if you just speak basic Polish, like cześć, which means like hi or good day or hi. I think it's hi. Something else is good day, which escapes me. Dzień dobry. Yeah, I think that's what we're looking for. And that's really a great icebreaker. It shows that you are invested to some level. But yeah, we're going to wrap up this video, getting a little longer than anticipated. But once again, I thought those were a couple things that you should know. And one thing that personally annoyed me was the customer service and not serving drinks at a cold temperature, but like a room temperature. And with, the current weather, that is not too refreshing. And I also thought it was interesting on how cliquey it is, because the Belarusians are usually hanging out together, the Ukrainians hanging out together, the Polish hanging out together. And I'm not saying they don't mix, but there is a quiet resentment from what I can tell. All right, so thank you for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next video. And as always, peace, much love.